Hello, and welcome back to Humanity First. This is actually my second take of this video. I made a video, it was like 35 minutes long, and I really liked it, and I went to upload it, but unfortunately, apparently, there wasn't audio in the video. And so here we are, we're doing it again, but hopefully it should be smoother the second time around, so we'll see. But yeah. So I wanted to talk today about a news story that you might have heard of, or you might not have heard of. It didn't really break, I would say, into the mainstream, but amongst those that really care about artificial intelligence, about the growth of this technology, it did make the rounds. So you might have encountered it. And in my opinion, this is the biggest story so far in 2026. And before we jump into the actual news, I wanted to bring back to your attention this analogy that we had before, that we talked about before, of Game of Thrones. So in Game of Thrones, what's driving the narrative is really this idea that winter's coming. It's this threat, continual threat of what is building in the north. There's this massive army of the undead, and it's growing in the north. And it's becoming increasingly powerful. And it's a threat to everyone. An imminent threat to everyone. A growing threat to everyone. And you have all the nobles of Westeros that are all have their petty squabbles and their disagreements and conflicts and their drama. But all of this is really just a distraction from the real danger. And I feel like with artificial intelligence, we really are in a similar situation. There is this rising tide, this technology that's growing in capabilities all the time. And it is also a growing threat to humanity. But people are distracted with politics within nations, politics between nations, and no one is paying attention to this growing threat that massively outmatches any other threat on the horizon. So the story that I wanted to talk about is that now it seems like it's confirmed. This is still to some degree an unfolding story, but it seems like it's confirmed that for the first time in history, artificial intelligence has solved a previously unsolved and famous mathematical conjecture. So we'll go talk a little bit about exactly what happened, talk a little bit about the history of the build up to the story, and then we'll talk about what are possibly some of the implications of this story. So the news essentially is that a mathematician, with the help of working with some AI models, notably ChatGPT 5.2, and a more mathematics focused, smaller model called Aristotle that produces lean code. So lean is like a programming language that's used to formalize like mathematical proofs so that they're checkable by a computer. That he was able to use those models to more or less autonomously solve a previously unsolved mathematical problem. And the problem that was solved was one of the Erdos problems. I believe that is how you pronounce the name, Erdos. So Paul Erdos was a very famous mathematician who left behind a little over 1,000 problems or conjectures as sort of like a challenge to future mathematicians. And people ever since have been trying to have looked into all these different conjectures. Some have been proven, some have been disproven, some have been shown to be unsolvable. So about 50%, I think about half of the problems have been resolved and half haven't yet. And for this story, this individual was able to essentially have the solution to one of these problems solved by different AI models, at least for one problem and possibly for two problems, because apparently the proof can apply to two conjectures, to prove two conjectures. So potentially you could have up to two problems solved at once. So that's the big story, and that's something that people in the field of mathematics have been waiting for a long time, because much like programming, in mathematics, people have been increasing their usage of models to assist them in their research work. And the models have been getting better and better. And everyone was waiting for the moment when a model is good enough that it can pretty much autonomously solve a problem itself without human intervention, or with very limited human intervention. And that's indeed the case for this problem. So the amount of prompting from the human was extremely minimal. Apparently, the person who solved this problem just gave the model ChatGPT 5.2 Pro, which for some reason tends to be really popular for amongst mathematicians. It seems like it's the best model to use for abstract mathematics, for like mathematical research, which is interesting. But this so it seems like they prompted the model with this problem, and usually with these problems there are a few trivial solutions. So the model gave him some trivial solutions. He told it to give him a more general solution, and then he was able to get the proof that he was looking for, a novel proof at that, to this problem. And so the procedure here is that ChatGPT, so there's almost like to solve this problem, you're using two different models. There's ChatGPT 5.2 and then there's Aristotle. So ChatGPT 5.2 gives you the informal structure of the proof. And then that informal structure is fed into Aristotle that translates it to a more formal structure, to lean code and patches some maybe holes to make sure that the proof is nice and robust. And out of this process, the proof that came out is a complete proof and has been verified by several famous mathematicians at this point. So it seems like it is established now as a legitimate proof to the problem. So this is a very significant development, and it really caps the trend that has occurred in mathematics, where these models have been getting better and better and better and better, and have been more and more integrated into the work of mathematicians for automatic proofing. And there was actually several false starts to this. So there was a moment in December where people thought that this had occurred for the first time. But it was found out at that point that the proof that the model came up with was actually copied from some obscure source that apparently was not known at the time. So there was literature published somewhere that had a proof for this conjecture that everyone thought was unsolved, and the model simply found the solution and copied it. And so that was kind of a big moment, seemed like a big moment, but then they found out that there was a previous solution and that the model simply copied the solution. There were also moments where a model found a new proof for an already solved problem. So that was like, it showed some creativity for that the model was able to solve a problem in a novel way, but it was a problem that was already solved, so it wasn't as big of a deal. But this is a big deal because it's a novel solution to a totally unsolved problem, and for this, it doesn't seem like there's any buried literature somewhere that includes this proof, or any proof for this particular conjecture. So that's pretty much the story that has occurred. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about the significance of this. And I wanted to talk about the significance in two domains. First in mathematics, and then in general. So in mathematics, this is really a critical milestone that has been hit. As I stated, there has been a growing reliance on artificial intelligence in mathematics research as of late, which is crazy because really, like, these kinds of generalized large language models and their usage, that part for the formalized proofing, that has actually been around for a while, and models to formalize proofs, that has been around for a while. But the large language models, relying on them to come up with creative and novel solutions to mathematical problems, that aspect really comes from large language models that kind of hit the mainstream in 2022. And so in essentially 3 to 4 years, these models have gone from being totally useless for mathematical reasoning, for mathematical research, being in fact so bad that no one would have ever thought to use them for mathematical research, to now potentially almost replacing a large part of the role of the human in the research work. So it's an extremely rapid progress in the usefulness of these models for research. But so in a way, this is a milestone, because at this point, I think this is the critical point at which now this image of a mathematician working with a model and depending heavily on the model to solve problems is now the dominant paradigm for mathematical research. And you already see it, because after this news came out, there's already a bunch of still unconfirmed solutions now that all purport to use also models to assist in their solutions. Sometimes the solutions are produced fully autonomously. Sometimes there's a kind of a human AI collaboration to develop the solution. But you can clearly see that now this has become the dominant way to do mathematical research. And not only does this now mean that that for the foreseeable future, AI models will play a critical role in mathematical research, but it also changes the tone of that interaction between the human and the models. Because what had been true up to this point, and still is true to a large extent, is that it really is the human that's driving the progress on problems. It's really the human that's coming up with that critical insight that you need to be able to solve a problem. And you can use a model to help you generate ideas. You can use a model if you're stuck, to kind of try to give you some ideas about how to move forward. But the person that was driving the progress was the human. But this, now that we've entered this phase where AI models can actually come up with full solutions themselves, this is now no longer true. That critical aspect is the part that is being performed by the machines. And really the role of the human is sort of like the validator. The role of the human is to make sure that the model kind of stays on track and evaluates the solution to make sure that it's correct. So really, this is, in some ways, as sad as it is to say, this is the end of humanity driving the progress of mathematics. This field that was developed by humans 2,500 years ago with the ancient Greeks, or even before that, and has been sustained and expanded upon by generations and generations of humans. In some ways, now this is the signal that this era is ending, that really mathematics as a field is going to now be driven by AI models. So mathematics has fundamentally changed, and this is the sign of that. This is the milestone for that change. But in addition to that, I wanted to talk about how this affects everything else as well. So I think what this shows more than anything is the tremendous and ever-expanding capabilities of models, and especially models used to solve certain problems in a certain configuration where you have a central generalized model that almost gets to call a smaller, more specialized model. So in this case, you had the big model, which was ChatGPT 5.2 Pro, and it was trained on everything. It's a generalist. So it has this creativity that can come up with a novel mathematical solution. But then you have that model will rely on a smaller module, this Aristotle model, that is a specialist, to translate its informal solution to a formal form that can be that in the lean programming language. And I think that this arrangement will allow for these models to expand in different domains and to really improve in many, many different domains. You can imagine, for example, a robot. My mind always goes there, but this is really where you can see this taking place. You can have a autonomous navigation module that's a smaller model that can translate the more sophisticated plans of a general model into commands that can actually, control the robot's mechanics, move it around. So that can be a breakthrough in robotics. Or in any field. In any field, you can make a small, specialized model and then have the large model. And as the large model gets more and more capable, it learns better how to use the smaller model, when to call it, how to prompt it. And it almost uses that smaller model as a tool to accomplish its tasks. And as the capabilities of models increase in general, then it improves both parts. It improves both modules. It improves the generalized module, the general model the large general model because its outputs are better, it learns better, it knows how to use the specialist model more, and it improves the specialist model. It becomes more efficient. It can learn, it can be trained on less data, etc. So even with our current our current model architecture and how models are trained, already you can create very powerful systems out of combining different models, especially that arrangement where you have a large generalized model and a small expert model. And ultimately, this is, of course, extremely worrying because, yes, this happened in mathematics, but it's not restricted to mathematics. The way that these models are growing in power and capabilities is in many ways like a child grows. So when a child grows, they grow in capabilities in all domains. When their brains are developing, all parts of the brain are developing. So they get better at language. They get better at reading social cues. They get better at fine motor control. They get better at mathematical reasoning. All those domains improve at the same time, and models are much the same as well. Just making sure that the audio is still on, which it is, so we're good. So they're improving in all domains at the same time. And then finally, to wrap up, I want to show specifically the domain that I'm very worried about with an example. You might have encountered something similar. So I like to use Claude Code. So Claude Code is essentially the Claude model, so Anthropic's model, with certain scaffolding that allows it to act as a sort of coding agent. So you can, for example, open a new repo or have an existing repo with a bunch of code, and you can give Claude Code a more high-level goal for what to accomplish in the repo. And you can watch Claude Code will break down the goal that you gave it into sub goals, and then attack each in turn and accomplish each in turn. And Claude Code is extremely popular, and other companies have their own versions. There's also an open source version of that same basic idea. But Claude recently, Anthropic recently produced, I forget the exact name. It's effectively Claude Code, but for more general work. So it doesn't have to be strictly coding. I think it's Claude Workalong, but I'm not sure. And so I was kind of like messing with it. I was playing with it a little bit. And I had this experience. So first I asked it to organize my desktop because my desktop was an absolute mess. And sure enough, it decided what to do. It broke it down and it organized my desktop, and it did a very good job. To be honest, I feel like it did a better job than I would have done if I was trying to organize my desktop. It figured out what the main folder should be, and it put all the right files in the right folders, and I was very impressed. Then after that, I asked it to play a song. So it pulled up Spotify and it asked me what song I would like it to play. I told it to play something that it thought I would like. And then I could see that it was thinking, looking at some of the files that it saw while it was arranging my desktop. And from that, it was reasoning about what kind of person I was, what my preferences probably would be in music. And then it picked a song, and a song that I happen to like. So it did an excellent job. And I mean, look at that. Look at that. And I think what that shows is that these growth and model capabilities that are making it now so good in mathematical research are translating over to more agentic tasks as well. that reasoning ability that makes it good at solving problems creatively makes it good at performing some high level task, like play me a song and you choose something that I would like by itself. It can figure out that there is the actual computer use aspect of this, of pulling up Spotify and pulling out a certain song from Spotify. So that requires control of the command line, so like computer control. And then there's also the part about thinking about how it can figure out what I am like as a person and what music I would like, and then reasoning back based on its context and looking at the files that it saw while it was arranging my desktop, so that it can get insights about the kind of person I was, what music I would like. And yeah, that was definitely a awesome moment. It was a moment that truly filled me with awe, because it's incredible that you have a machine and you see it engaging in this kind of creative, intelligent behavior to accomplish a goal. I had a few such moments. I had that moment I remember first when ChatGPT started talking. I was like, oh my God, a computer is talking. Actually forming sentences, generating new text. It was a magical moment. And also the moment with DeepSeek, with chain of reasoning, when it was like thinking like a human. And that was also incredible. But this was like that. And it was this agenticness that really took me off guard. That, oh my God, like it can reason in a very clever way with limited resources at its disposal. So it only knew so much about me, but it used what it had to accomplish a goal very well. So really what we see here is there is a rising tide, and the rising tide lifts all boats. And we will reach different milestones in different fields. In mathematics, this is definitely a milestone that was reached, and it will change mathematics forever. But also it's the sign that the tide as a whole is rising. And you can see across domains, even in agentic capabilities. All right. Well, I'll stop there. Thank you so much for listening. And I'll talk to you all again soon. All right. Take care.